You people shouldn't even be allowed in rooms like this." She said it loud enough for the whole floor to hear. The man she was talking to didn't flinch. He just looked at her, nodded once, and walked back to his office. His office, on the top floor of the hospital he co-founded. Rewind. Let's go back to the beginning. 6:12 a.m., Memphis, Tennessee. The kind of morning where the sky stays purple longer than it should, like it's not ready to commit to daylight. The streets around Memphis Medical Center were quiet. A delivery truck idling at the loading dock. A security guard making his last round before shift change. Steam rising from a grate in the sidewalk, slow and lazy. Dr. Owen Beaumont was already inside. He came in the same way he always did. Side entrance, badge tap, elevator to the 7th floor. No entourage, no announcement. He carried a paper cup of coffee from the cart on the ground floor, the same one he'd been buying from for 11 years, the same cart run by Miss Elma, who knew his order before he reached the register and always put an extra sleeve on the cup because she knew he'd hold it too long. He walked the floor before rounds. That was his ritual. Not to check on charts, his team handled that. He walked to feel the temperature of the place, to hear which rooms were quiet and which had that particular quality of silence that meant something was wrong. 41 years as a cardiothoracic surgeon had given him that instinct. The ability to read a room the way other people read text. Dr. Owen Beaumont was 63 years old. He stood 6 feet tall, wore wire-rimmed glasses, and had the steady hands of a man who had repaired more than 4,000 human hearts. He'd grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in North Memphis with his mother, a home health aide who worked doubles, and his grandmother Estelle, who used to say that the difference between a man and a good man was whether he showed up before anyone asked him to. He showed up. By 19, he'd won a full scholarship to Vanderbilt. By 28, he was a resident at Cleveland Clinic, the only black face in the cardiac surgery program, moving through rooms where people sometimes handed him the patient's tray before they registered who he was. He learned early to let that pass. Not because it didn't sting. It did. But because there was always work to do, and the work was the point. He came back to Memphis at 34 with a vision and a business partner, a white surgeon named Dr. Paul Greer, who'd been his closest friend since residency. Together they spent 6 years building Memphis Medical Center into one of the top cardiac programs in the Mid-South. Owen's name wasn't on the building. He didn't need it on a building. It was in the outcomes, in the survival rates, in the follow-up calls he made himself to patients who hadn't expected to see another spring. He was also, quietly, the majority owner of this hospital. 53%, a fact he'd never once led with in conversation. At 7:45 a.m., his surgical resident, Dr. Jasmine Truitt, 29 years old, sharp as a blade and twice as quick, met him at the nurse's station with the morning rundown. 3 post-op patients stable, 1 overnight admission, a 47-year-old with an aortic dissection, already prepped for intervention. 2 consults from the night shift. "You get any sleep?" Owen asked without looking up from the chart. Jasmine smiled. 4 hours. That's too many. You're getting soft. She laughed, which was the right answer, and they moved together toward the patient rooms. By 10 o'clock, Owen was out of the OR. The aortic dissection had gone cleanly, 3 hours and 20 minutes. No complications. He scrubbed out, changed, and was making his way down the 6th floor corridor when the noise started. You could hear her before you turned the corner. A woman's voice, sharp and carrying, the kind of voice that expected rooms to rearrange themselves around it. Owen slowed his pace. He recognized the particular pitch of someone performing outrage rather than feeling it. He came around the corner and saw her, Margaret Ashford, 61 years old, silver blonde hair, a camel coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was standing at the nurse's station, her posture rigid, her chin tilted at an angle that suggested she found the ceiling morally disappointing. Her daughter, a woman in her late 30s named Claire, stood 2 steps behind her with the expression of someone who had been apologizing for this scene since childhood. Margaret was talking to Nurse Beatrice Howell, who had worked cardiac care for 22 years and had the patience of a woman who had seen everything and decided none of it was worth raising her voice over. "I was told there would be a specialist." A real specialist. Not. Margaret gestured vaguely at the nurse's station, at the charts, at the general concept of the hospital. I don't understand why this facility can't produce someone appropriate to speak with us. Beatrice kept her voice level. Dr. Beaumont is the attending cardiothoracic surgeon on your father's case, Mrs. Ashford. He performed the procedure this morning, and he'll be by shortly, too. I've been waiting for 40 minutes. Margaret set her handbag on the counter. 40 minutes, and every time I ask for an update, someone sends me a different person who can't tell me anything useful. Where is the actual doctor? I'm right here. Owen said it calmly, the way he said most things. He came up beside Beatrice, nodded once at her, and turned his attention to Margaret. Mrs. Ashford, I'm Dr. Beaumont. Your father came through this morning's procedure well. The section was confined to the ascending aorta, and we were able to repair it without complication. He's in recovery now and stable. I was planning to sit down with you and your sister once. You're the surgeon. Margaret looked at him the way people sometimes look at a painting they've decided they don't like before they've finished looking at it, head to toe. Slow. I am. She turned to Claire, who was already staring at the floor. I asked for the head of cardiac surgery. I am the head of cardiac surgery, Owen said. Margaret turned back. Her expression hadn't changed, but something behind it had shifted, something that had decided to move forward anyway because the performance was already in motion. I was expecting someone with more. She paused, selected her words carefully, though not carefully enough. Someone with more of a track record in cases like this. Owen looked at her. Your father had a type A aortic dissection. Without intervention within hours, the mortality rate approaches 90%. He's alive. His heart is intact. His prognosis is excellent. I'm not questioning the outcome, Margaret said. I'm questioning whether we had the right team in place to achieve it. The nurse's station had gone quiet. A young orderly pushing a cart slowed to a stop, then thought better of it and kept moving. Two nurses at the far end of the hall were not looking in this direction with tremendous effort. Claire touched her mother's arm. Mom! Margaret pulled away. I have a right to ask questions about my father's care. You do, Owen said. What would you like to know? She looked at him again. That look. I'd like to know who authorized this procedure. I'd like to know who the attending physician is. I'd like to know why no one thought to consult with our family before putting my father on a table. Your father was admitted unconscious with a confirmed dissection. We consulted your sister, who is listed as medical power of attorney. She authorized the procedure. Your father is alive because of the time we didn't spend waiting. Margaret's jaw tightened. She looked at Claire. You authorized this. Claire looked up. Her voice was steady in a way that suggested it had taken effort to get there. Yes, because the doctor explained exactly what was happening and exactly what would happen if we waited. I made the decision Dad would have wanted made without calling me. You were on a flight. There wasn't time. Margaret turned back to Owen. She was recalibrating, but she hadn't stopped. That was the thing about a certain kind of person. They didn't stop. They just switched tactics. I'd like a second opinion, she said, from someone at Vanderbilt or Mayo. I want my father transferred. Beatrice, to her eternal credit, did not make a sound. Owen said, Your father is 12 hours post-op from open-heart surgery. Transferring him now would be medically inadvisable and potentially fatal. If after his recovery period you wish to consult with another program, I will personally assist with that referral. But right now, moving him is not an option I can support. Then I'd like to speak to someone above you. The hallway stayed quiet. Owen looked at her for a long moment, not with anger, not with the strained patience of a man who was used to managing his reactions for an audience, just with clarity, the kind of calm that comes from being right, knowing it, and having no need to perform that knowledge. There isn't anyone above me at this facility, he said. I'm the co-founder and majority owner of Memphis Medical Center. If you have concerns about your father's care, I'm who you bring them to. And I'm still standing here, Mrs. Ashford, ready to answer any question you have about his treatment. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Margaret's mouth opened slightly, closed. Her eyes moved just briefly to Beatrice, who was looking to Beatrice, who was looking straight ahead, expression perfectly neutral. Then to Claire, who was looking at her mother with an expression that had stopped pretending to be anything other than what it was. Margaret stopped. Started again. You own. I co-founded this hospital in 2001, Owen said. Your father has been a patient here for 3 years. He's received care from 6 members of my team. This morning I repaired his heart. Is there something specific about his treatment you'd like to discuss? Margaret said nothing. For the first time since she'd entered the hallway, she had nothing to say. Claire stepped forward. Her voice was quieter now, but not smaller. Dr. Beaumont. Thank you. Can we please see him when he's ready? Of course. Beatrice will let you know when he's settled. I'll come by to talk through the recovery plan in about an hour. He looked at Margaret one more time, without heat, without satisfaction. Then he nodded and walked down the hall toward the elevators. He did not look back. Margaret stood at the nurse's station for a long moment. Then she picked up her handbag from the counter, slowly, with the deliberate movements of someone who was hoping the room would stop existing around her. It didn't. What happened next? Nobody planned. But that's how these things go. A nursing assistant named Deja Brantley, 24 years old, had been near the supply closet at the end of the hall during the entire exchange. She hadn't meant to witness it. She'd been restocking compression sleeves, moving quietly the way people do when they don't want to interrupt something that clearly isn't their business. But she'd heard everything. She also had her phone in her scrub's pocket. She wasn't recording. She'd just been texting her roommate between restocking runs. But after Owen walked away and the hallway opened back up into its normal rhythms, she stood there for a moment replaying what she'd just seen in her head. That evening, on her break, she posted about it on her personal account. She didn't use anyone's name. She described it in 3 paragraphs. A patient's family member who came in demanding, who questioned whether the surgeon was qualified, who asked for someone above him, who found out he owned the building. She ended it with one line. He just answered her questions and walked away. Didn't raise his voice once. She tagged the hospital. She had 340 followers. By the next morning, it had been reposted 11,000 times. The original post got picked up by a healthcare equity account with 800,000 followers, then by a Black Excellence account with 2.1 million, then by 2 national journalists who tracked these stories for a living. By Thursday, the phrase, "he owned the building," was trending. Someone found Margaret Ashford's LinkedIn profile. Someone else found a thread from a neighborhood Facebook group in which she had written, at length, about her concerns regarding the direction certain communities were taking in her suburb outside of Nashville. Someone found a letter to the editor she'd written in 2019 about a rezoning proposal that used language careful enough to be deniable and specific enough to leave no doubt. None of it was illegal. All of it was visible. Hikikun. By the weekend, Owen hadn't said a single word publicly. His hospital's communications team had released one statement. Memphis Medical Center is proud of the care provided by Dr. Beaumont and our entire cardiac team. We remain committed to excellence and equity in every patient interaction. That was it. No names, no drama, 14 sentences. But the internet didn't need Owen's help. Inside the hospital, something else was happening that no one outside would fully see. On Thursday morning, Owen walked into the break room on the 6th floor and found Deja Brantley sitting at the small table with a cup of tea, scrolling through her phone, looking like someone who'd been called to the principal's office and wasn't sure yet if they were in trouble. She stood up when she saw him. "Dr. Beaumont, I'm so sorry, I didn't think it would." "Sit down," he said. She sat. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat too. "You didn't use any names," he said. "No, sir." "You didn't post anything that wasn't true." "No, sir." He looked at her for a moment. "How long have you been here?" 7 months. "You like the work?" She blinked, recalibrated. Yes, I do. I want to go into nursing. I'm finishing my prerequisites." Owen nodded slowly. "My grandmother," he said, "used to say that the only people worth paying attention to are the ones who show up when nobody's watching." He stood. "Keep doing good work, Ms. Brantley." He left. Deja sat there for a moment looking at the door he'd just walked through. Then she picked up her tea and took a long sip. A week later, she received a letter from the hospital's education assistance program informing her that she had been approved for full tuition support for her nursing degree. The letter was signed by the program director and countersigned by Dr. Owen Beaumont. She kept that letter folded in her wallet for a long time. Back in the world above the hospital walls, the fallout from the viral post continued to move on its own timeline. Margaret Ashford's name was attached to the story in every comment section, on every repost, in every cable news segment that ran the clip of Deeja's post as text on screen while a host read it aloud. Margaret had not made any public statement. Her social media had gone private within 48 hours. Her father, Wallace Ashford, was recovering well. He was moved out of the cardiac ICU on day 3. On day 5, he was sitting up and eating soft foods. He was a quiet man, 79 years old, with the careful disposition of someone who had learned over decades to pick his battles. He asked the nurses questions about their shifts. He thanked the orderlies by name. On the morning of day 6, Owen stopped by on rounds. Wallace was awake, looking out the window at the Memphis skyline, still gray with early morning. "Dr. Beaumont," Wallace said. He didn't say anything else for a moment. Then, "I heard there was some trouble with my daughter." "No trouble," Owen said. "Family members ask hard questions in stressful situations. It's normal." Wallace looked at him. "You don't have to do that." Owen met his eyes. He didn't. "My daughter has always." Wallace stopped, seemed to decide something. "I love her, but I don't always like who she is. I haven't for a long time." He looked back at the window. "I'm sorry." "You don't have anything to apologize for," Owen said. "Maybe not legally," Wallace said, dry and quiet, "but I'm apologizing anyway." Owen nodded once. Claire had been visiting every morning before work. She brought her father's reading glasses from home, his preferred brand of hard candies, a paperback novel he'd been halfway through when he was admitted. On the morning Owen stopped by, she arrived at the room at 7:15 and found him already more alert than he'd been in days. She thanked Owen in the hallway, quietly. No performance. Just 2 words and direct eye contact. He appreciated that more than she knew. Now, here's the part that doesn't always make the social media posts, the part that gets left out when people package this kind of story into something clean and satisfying. Margaret Ashford came back, not to cause a scene, not to double down. She came back on day 8, alone, without Claire, without her camel coat. She wore a plain gray cardigan, and she looked like someone who had spent a week being very still and very honest with herself, the kind of honesty that costs something. She asked at the front desk if Dr. Beaumont had a moment. The front desk called up. Owen's assistant told her he was between patients and could give her 10 minutes. She sat in the chair across from his desk. His office was not what she'd expected, though she couldn't have said what she expected. There were books on cardiology, yes, and framed diplomas, but there was also a child's drawing tacked to the corner of his whiteboard. A crayon heart, red and lopsided, with the words "Thank You, DRB" in block letters above it. And on his desk, beside his keyboard, a wooden-handled letter opener that looked old. His grandmother's. He'd had it for 30 years, but Margaret didn't know that. "I owe you an apology," she said. Owen waited. "I came into this hospital and I made assumptions about who you were before you'd said a single word to me. I questioned your competence. I questioned your authority, and I used language that." She paused. "I told myself I was being an advocate for my father. That's what I told myself, but that's not what I was doing." She looked at her hands. "I was doing what I've been doing my whole life and calling it something else." The room was quiet. "I don't know if that means anything to you," she said. "I don't know if it should, but I needed to say it in person, to your face. Not in a statement, not through a lawyer. Here." Owen looked at her for a long moment. "It means something," he said. "I won't tell you it fixes anything, but it means something that you came." She nodded. She stood. She put her hand out, and he shook it. Then she walked out. He sat at his desk for a moment after she left, looking at the wooden letter opener. Then he pulled a chart from the stack beside him, clicked his pen, and got back to work. The story had one more chapter that the internet never fully covered. The viral moment generated a wave of conversation about racial bias in hospital settings, specifically about black physicians being mistaken for staff, questioned about their credentials, or treated as less capable than their white colleagues. Owen was asked to speak about it at a conference in Atlanta that spring. He accepted on one condition. He wanted to bring Jasmine Tritt with him. She spoke first. She talked about what it was like to walk into a room and watch a patient's eyes search past her for the real doctor. About the particular arithmetic of being a young black woman in cardiac surgery, doing twice the work to earn half the default credibility. She was 29 years old, and she spoke for 8 minutes without notes. The room was very quiet. Owen spoke after her. He talked about his grandmother Estelle, about North Memphis, about the year he turned 34 and came home with an idea and not much else. He talked about what it means to build something not because you need the world to see it, but because the work itself demands it. He ended with this: I have operated on 4,211 hearts. I have held this particular muscle in my hands more times than I can count, and what I can tell you from experience is that it looks the same in every chest. It wants the same things. It fails the same ways. It can be repaired by the same hands. He paused. I am those hands. I was always those hands. Some people just needed a little longer to see it. The room stood up. Memphis Medical Center's cardiac surgery program became one of the most talked about in the country that year. Applications to the residency program tripled. Deja Brantley started nursing school in the fall. Owen was at work by 6 the next morning. Side entrance, badge tap, elevator to the 7th floor. Miss Elma handed him his coffee with an extra sleeve, same as always. He carried it down the hall, felt the temperature of the floor, listened for the rooms that needed listening to. 41 years, 4,000 hearts, one wooden letter opener, from a woman who told him the difference between a man and a good man was whether he showed up before anyone asked him to. He was already there.